Doing awesome, sir. Doing awesome. We got 4 signups yesterday in Chula Vista.
You the man.
Well, Marcus, how do you go? So I want you to let you know.
At the new price point, I hope.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, so we had one.
He goes,
We had one parent.
2 weeks.
Is that
And
hold on one second.
I got it.
Is that Sal talking?
yes, yes, sir.
Is your
Yes.
camera working, Sal?
It is. Hold on, let me put it on.
Good idea.
All right.
There
So unfortunately, I'm driving because my babysitter just arrived at 11. So I'm driving her to school.
okay.
But yeah, yesterday we had 4 parents. One of them invited two friends. So I had a group conference meeting with all of them, and they all joined. And then one of them came in earlier, chatted with them, and she decided she was gonna go put it out till later, like the end of April, to pay for it. And then I basically told her, well, you could sign up today and we'll just charge you on the 30th of April. And she was all good with that.
There you go.
So it was awesome. Great
See,
day. And Miss Smith is right there. She was a big part of all of it.
Good
we
job,
tagged
Georgette.
each other.
Must be the Smith thing.
It's all it is. I give it all to
it's a Smith thing.
the team.
Well,
So it was
that's the
great
key.
day.
And this was 4 different families.
Yes, 4
4
different
different
families, but 3 of them are all friends of each other. So
Now,
one
did they all-
referred the other
Did
one.
they all come off of one lead?
Well, yeah. So no, one lead brought in 2 other friends, and then
Uh-huh.
another lead was, I think, either a Facebook. Yeah, it was a Facebook lead.
Okay. Well, that's how you double down. That's how you get your numbers up. You know, you stretch those leads into more enrollments, you know, a friend of a friend, and keep expanding it. That's a good job. What is your monthly, and what was your down payment?
$350 down per child, and $124 every 2 weeks, so $268 a month.
You're the man. Okay. Price point is good. I like it. Yeah. Let's give him a hand on that one. Now,
Thank you, sir.
Now, I tell you, it's a learning experience, and it's another thing, you know, because you did raise your prices, and you know, I know sometimes people are very, you know, we were talking about it on the meeting yesterday. Some people were antsy about not raising their prices, or they raised it to you know, $199 or $197 or something like that. They're afraid to get to that $247. You know, you've got to realize that the objection to the price, the difference between 197 or 247 is only in your mind. So we've got to get everybody at least on that price point. And if you're on the 247, then it's time to go to the 297. And
Yes.
I tell you, the most important thing I'm going to tell you guys, especially the new guys, the new people on the meeting here, the single most important thing that you could do to get your gross up, to learn how this stuff really works firsthand, is to be in Colorado next month at that live meeting. That whole weekend training, it never fails that I have people constantly come up to me and say that now everything makes sense. Now I understand what you've been saying. And these are the things that are going to teach you not just one part of our program, but it's going to connect all the dots for you. You'll get a chance on Thursday to go behind the scenes, and that's pretty much just watch classes going on at the Thornton Mile High, so you can see all of this stuff we were talking about, from all the character worksheets and handing out the stripes and the leadership tops and how they're wearing those in class, the instructor trainees and how they utilize them in the classes. You'll get a chance probably to see intros or any of that stuff, but it's just so much stuff. And then this one is I consider one of the best meetings that we ever had. I mean, I love going to a Disney or go to the Naval Academy, etc. But the special thing about this one is that there's a black belt test too. And it gives you a chance to see the big picture where you get to see how many black belts that you can actually generate from your school. You know, most of the time, you know, I know this one with the social distancing, normally we have about 200 people testing. You know, that might be limited a little bit this time, so it might be down closer to 120 or 30 or something. But for that many black belts from 2 schools, you guys got to realize that that's what a black belt school is. It generates black belts, and that gives you more testimonials. And then you get to see how the higher levels of black belts are, how they're testing and what they're testing on, and how we're able to keep that same testing cycle from white belt all the way up to 5th degree black belt, you know, where they can keep testing on a 2 or 3 month cycle all the way to the 5th degree, not just to black belt, but black belt and beyond.
Yeah. And 6th, 7th, whatnot. Exactly.
And again, for those people that that didn't get a chance to see my post, yesterday was Master Oliver's 50th birthday. So we wanted
Or
to
39th.
Oh,
If we're gonna lie, let's make it a good
Yeah,
look.
really.
It was also Greg Macy's birthday the day before that. So
We had
happy
a
birthday
couple
to Greg.
birthdays.
Yeah.
And you guys, you know, if you have a birthday, if you're on your birthday week, let us know too, so we can wish you a happy birthday too. Okay.
I don't want to be reminded that I'm turning 40 next Thursday.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Well, 40 is the new 30. You know that.
There you go. Okay. Moving right along here on that note, there was a comment, and I'm not sure, I'm trying to remember who it was, a comment about saying down payment rather than initial tuition or something on there.
That was me.
Okay. Explain what it was you were saying on that post.
So I had a conference and everything,
Can you turn
and
your camera on, Candace?
Yeah, go ahead, Candace.
one sec.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was eating. So I had a conference and everything last week with some new intros, and I said enrollment fee, and the dad, so he does allotment for AC company, big one, and he pretty much asked me to break down what the enrollment fee all was for. So me and Master Kim talked, and he said instead of saying enrollment fee is kind of like that trigger word, saying down payment instead, because how we do it.
Let me interrupt you there for just a second.
Go ahead.
Is first, I disagree with that analysis,
Okay.
and I'm working on finding Master Smith $100 every time he says down payment. It's one of the things I'm trying to get him to
Initial
stop using.
investment. You must
Yeah.
say
No. Let me talk, and I'll get the words right.
Fix it.
The Tom Hopkins language is initial investment, but that background was in buying houses, right? So your initial investment, your monthly investment was the way that Tom Hopkins would phrase it. Again, given his background was real estate.
Mhm.
No. Well, the first thing is, whatever you said, let's forget about that for a second, but whatever you said, he says, what?
break it down.
Break it down.
She
What
can
covers
explain
all
the
the fees? He wanted like money wise, monetary wise on, okay, how much is this? How much?
Oh, okay. Don't tell me what he wanted. Just tell me what he said.
So I did initial conference and everything, and I get to the enrollment part, so talking monetary
Yeah.
value. And I said, okay, well, the enrollment fee, it's usually 600 right now. You're coming in under a scholarship, so it's 300. And then your monthly tuition is 297. It's usually about 349.
Yeah.
So you're coming in with a scholarship, so you get $50 off from that. And then I tell them about how the monthly comes out automatically and everything. And then he comes straight out the door. He goes, okay, well, what all does the enrollment fee cover? And I said, I go on to tell
Okay.
him, well, it covers reading material.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We'll put a period right there.
Okay.
He says, what all does the enrollment fee cover?
Mhm.
Well, that's just what the tuition to get him started in the program.
Mhm.
Period. That's the answer.
Okay.
No more.
No more.
Say it again.
Oh, no, I tried nipping it right there, but he was very,
Okay. Well, don't
Adamant.
editorialize.
Mhm.
What did he say?
I mean, I
What
said,
did she say to try
No,
to?
no, no, okay.
All over.
Okay, you tried that. So then he said,
can you break down the enrollment fee for money wise per thing, per item that it's covering?
no, it's just getting him enrolled.
Oh, I tried that. They walked out the door.
Well, okay. They walked out the door. Where did the conversation go from there?
I mean, I called and everything, and I checked up on him. I was
No,
asking.
no. We're still in the same conversation.
Oh,
You're
go ahead.
editorializing
Oh, same.
and giving, yeah, still in the same conversation. Where did the conversation go from there?
From which part?
Can you itemize what that
Before it
covers? Now, Master Smith, let me handle it. Where did the conversation go from there?
Well, I went in to try to say it's part of the down payment. So the more that you put in with the enrollment fee and everything, the more that can be taken off with your tuition. But his trigger word was the fee.
Well, no, you're editorializing again.
Okay.
That's what you think. That's your mind reading.
Mhm.
Be careful about mind reading.
Okay.
One of the things I would certainly recommend for everybody to study cognitive behavior therapy, among other things. But the biggest fallacy people make in many things, but it's certainly in sales, is mind reading. You're telling us what you think he was thinking, and when you tell us what he said or did, you're giving us behavioral feedback. And when you tell us what he was thinking, you're guessing what was going on in his mind, which you have no clue about.
Okay.
See, that's just creating an analysis.
Okay.
Does that statement I just made make sense to everybody? Certainly when you're managing people, they do that all the time. And they especially do it about sales process, and they do it about pricing. Many other things as well. But okay, what did he say next?
It just kept going back to what does
What
it
did he
cover?
say?
I know. What did he say next?
No, it just literally kept going
What
back.
did
to
he
that.
say? No, what did he say?
What did he say next?
His word.
How much? What does it cover? He literally just kept repeating, "What does
What
that
does it cover? That gets Joey enrolled.
Yes.
No, that's what it covers. It gets Joey enrolled.
Okay.
Maybe he says something like, well, do we get anything else with that? Well, we're going to give him all the stuff that he needs initially to get, to be effective as a student.
Mhm.
Well, what is that? Oh, well, he's going to get a book and a uniform and, a couple other things. I mean, and notice the way that I'm saying that. He's going to get the stuff he needs to get started. Yeah, I mean, there's some physical stuff that comes with that, and we're going to get the ID card set up and get him set up in the school. But basically, that just covers getting him started, right?
Okay.
Now, your explanation is not one that I would ever go into on an enrollment conference,
Okay.
right? What I don't like about the word down payment
Okay.
is it sounds like I'm buying a car. What I don't like about the word monthly payment is nobody wants to pay a down payment. Nobody wants a new monthly payment,
Mhm.
right? Tuition, in my view, has a more positive ring. I don't mind paying tuition for my child's school.
Well, I
But I
said
don't want-
monthly tuition for monthly tuition because it sounds
Okay, but let me finish.
Okay.
But what you went into was, if you pay more of a down payment now, your monthly payment will be less. And it's we do everything automatically. All that stuff was happening at a point that, in my view, was too early in the conversation,
okay.
right? One is, I'm at a point that I've already presented, the monthly tuition. I'm not going to say anything about automatic payments, any of that stuff. That's going to happen, but I'm not going to, go through that, right?
Mhm.
What I am going to do is I'm going to, go into the initial tuition. It's normally 800 initially. Since you came in from blank, we give you a $400 discount or credit on that. So it's only going to be 400 initially to get started. How would you like to pay that? Well, what does that cover? Well, that covers getting him enrolled. I mean, that's what it is to enroll, and then it'll be, as we discussed, the $297 monthly after that.
Okay.
Can you break down what that covers? Covers getting him started in the martial arts classes.
Okay.
Well, why do I have to do that? Well, that's just the tuition to get him started. Right. And are there people who have a personality where they become combative about price? Sure, there are. Sometimes it's because it was handled poorly. Sometimes it's because they're an asshole. Right. And you've got to make the decision. I mean, is this person an asshole, which means I don't want assholes? Or is this person, I'm just trying to break it down for them and, explain it to them in a way that, they can get comfortable with it, right? I've had people that, I've talked into enrolling, and when they walked out of the office, they went, why did I do that? This is not going to be a good outcome for us, right? So you do have to be careful about that. But in reviewing all of this stuff, always just go with not your mind reading of what you think they're thinking, but go with the reality of what they said, what the body language was, what led up to it, and do an analysis of that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
But I disagree with, going, I just say this is the initial tuition to get started. Enrollment fee is fine. I don't have any objection to that. I like either one of those better than down payment. I'd say initial enrollment tuition or initial tuition would be what I would prefer. But then it's just if they get where they're combative or overly aggressive on things, that's when you want to go the opposite direction, right?
Yes.
Sometimes when they want more detail, you want to go into, take away and less detail because it's not going to get any better as you go into that. Does that make sense a little bit?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you guys did point out, Master Oliver, you pointed out, but I want to make sure everybody heard. She mentioned the automatic payment stuff in the middle of all that. That's irrelevant information. Do not mention that. It's irrelevant at that point. You're adding extra information that makes it more complicated.
Okay.
Yeah. And can trigger people sometimes.
Exactly.
Go. Just leave that for when you're setting up the paperwork.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna shut off my camera. I actually have a student I'm about to enroll right now.
Good. Well, make sure you get the
Practice.
enrollment
Yes, sir.
and put this time in your schedule from now on, and don't overlap intros for it.
It's not an intro. I already did conference and everything. Dad just came in to.
There you go.
Yeah.
I highly recommend you let him give you a credit card.
Okay.
Hey, sir, this is Gustavo. I'm sorry, my camera is not working. I have a question because I'm a little confused. When we talked, if I remember correctly, I was told that we should include all the stuff in the enrollment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Yes? Okay, so I had some pushback. I put it up in the group. I had some pushback the other day. Lady paid the $797 down. We're right now in the process of split testing the 2 weeks in our regular offer, which is the 4 weeks for $49, and they're kind of dead even.
Okay.
And so this lady was a 4 week for $49, and we said we're going to take the $49, put it into your initial tuition, upgrade your discount to $300. And so all you need to get started today is $500, and then I go through the spiel at $297, and that's what you're gonna do. She had no problem. She did it. The kid got it some initial stuff. He got like about $100 worth of gear. They walked out the door very happy. She calls back the next day, all pissed off. What happened in my free month? And we explained it to her that we used it, the cash value, and she wasn't having it.
Right. And Peter, I see you got on here, and I will we'll want to shift to you so we don't waste too much of your time today, Mr. Harnish. But Gustavo, the the thing, and this was the conversation Master Smith and was already having with Sal. Very similar situation, I think, 5 or 6 enrollments in a very same situation. Somebody, it's what I don't. It's the thing that I like least about offers that are 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. Is there's that thing that's floating in their mind, right, Gustavo?
Yes,
You
sir.
know, where's my four weeks? That's why I prefer shorter offers, shorter paid offers or shorter free offers. But anytime we have an offer that's like a 4 week, 6 week, 8 week, whatever it might be, we're always including the language of, because you came in from the $49 offer, because you made the donation at Children's Hospital, because, you know, whatever the because is we give you a $300 discount on the initial enrollment for applying that $49. Plus, you'll still get the month you paid for. And then we just add the month to the end.
Okay, so we're still taking the full 797 down.
Yeah,
But now instead of 12 months, they're getting 13.
right. Just add the expiration to a month at the end.
I would do that just so you don't have that problem, and you won't ever have the problem if you do that. And we're going to.
Well, don't say you won't ever.
Well,
You'll have all kinds of.
We're going to renew them to black belt before that time anyway. So it's going to add on eventually to their 4 or 6 year black belt program.
Yeah. I mean, we should never say you won't ever, because, you know, you're gonna have somebody pissed about something for all kinds of God knows reasons over the years. So, but
Thank you, sir.
does that answer the question?
Hey,
Gustavo?
Yeah, that helped a lot. And I apologize about the camera.
No, I would just always explain that you came in on the 6 week offer, the 4 week offer. Most people, you know, after a couple lessons, they know enough about the program to make a decision on whether they want to continue or not. Since you already paid the $49, we credit that. In fact, we give you a $300 discount on the enrollment for that. Plus, you still get the free month. And then if they come back to you and say, why am I paying, you know, the first payment in 4 weeks? Oh, we added that to the program. It's a 12-month trial enrollment. So we made a 13-month trial enrollment on the deal. Oh, okay. You know, no worries.
That
Then
helps a lot.
Then if they get any pushback, just have the next payment start in 30 days. So, you know, so you pay it now, and then instead of starting on May 1st, you'll start on, no problem. We'll just push we'll make it 13 months, but we'll start the payment after the month is over. Right.
Okay.
So if they push back, you can just add that to it.
Yeah, don't
So
start
either
with
way,
that.
Yeah.
Thank
there
you.
you go. There you go.
that helped
Absolutely.
a lot. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. So, hey, let Peter, we have a special guest here, and Peter Harnish. Peter Harnish is a top 1% wealth manager with Northwest Mutual. And some of you know that we've been working together a lot. Well, Peter and I now for what, 15 years or more.
Got 18, 19, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Long time. But he's been now working with the Martial Arts Wealth team since last year. But Peter, I wanted to talk about a couple of things and wanted to steal your expertise. And thank you so much for donating some time. And by the way, I've got your commitment. I want to get this publicly. You're going to come up and do some work with everybody in Keystone.
Yes. Looking forward to it. Very excited about it. And I will be up there for sure.
Live and in person. So
right.
I'm looking forward to that as well. And so everybody else knows two things that I'm going to make Peter do some work on is he's going to do a financial literacy class for all the kids, for all the test candidates. One for the ones that are, kids, and then a separate one for the parents and for the adults. And so we're, that's something I think really should be incorporated into everybody's curriculum. That's again something that Peter can help you with. They've got some great. Northwest Mutual has done some very high level PowerPoint webinar presentations, live meeting presentations, and so forth. So I'm sure you'd be happy to coordinate some of that stuff for them if they need it.
Absolutely. I mean, like we discussed a couple of days ago, Stephen, I think there's a lot of overlap between the discipline of martial arts and the discipline of financial planning. And I think it's a really neat value add for the various martial arts businesses to provide that to their clients and to the students as well. I think it's very unique, and it's something that probably that folks would not be expecting.
Yeah, it is the next step in character development for students. I had a short story about this, but I had a client, great guy, Sean Harvey, quite a few years ago now, but he's in Bermuda. And if you don't know, Bermuda is like 70,000 people and it's spread across 2 islands. And, it's not like he had a broad demographic, but he was running a cardio kickboxing program that kind of looked like everybody's cardio kickboxing program. And we completely reinvented it and turned it into $297, $497, $997 a month. And at the $997 a month, what they were doing is career coaching, financial planning, or financial goal setting, public speaking. They were doing a very high level, predominantly for women, career coaching and career development, along with developing their financial plans and so forth. And, we can go into that later as a more in-depth case study, but it went from they're paying $75 a month to come in and kick the bag to music to they were paying $1,000 a month to get ongoing coaching on everything from posture, dress, voice tone, obviously fitness, weight management, and so forth, but also in career development and financial development. But one of my topics, Peter, the reason I reached out to you to be here is we see a lot of martial arts schools that, and more recently, the ones that we're getting to double their gross, triple their gross, go from maybe just barely getting by to really doing a great job. And what happens is their lifestyle fluctuates with their revenue, but we're not seeing them 5 years later, 10 years later, truly being wealthy, right? Truly being in a situation where if a situation like 2020 impacts them, they've got plenty of money in reserve, that it's not like going out and chasing loans. And you and I were talking a little bit about the, like the SBA loans too. The argument for the SBA loans is they were practically giving it away by the interest rates. The argument against it is, I think you agree with me, but I just hate debt. And the more debt you get yourself into, the harder it is to really develop independence. Is that a fair way to say it, Peter?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what I think we need to do here on top of our real focus on wealth mastery, in other words, how to really develop substantive wealth as well as just revenue, is the way I like to think about it is your savings that goes away, that you don't pay attention to, that isn't tapped for COVID or isn't tapped for anything else. That's your develop your retirement. If you want to think about that, that's develop your long-term wealth. That's develop your financial independence. That should be just like you run a Visa or MasterCard. See, when you run a credit card, they take, more or less 3% off the top, right? None of us here spend any time worrying about that, right? It just comes off the top. That's out of sight, out of mind. We know what the net deposit is going to be. We plan on, I just did 10,000 minus 3% more or less. That's what's going in the bank. That's what I have to work with. Is one element I think that we should all be thinking about is at any level. So if the school is at 30,000 a month, or if the school is at 70,000 a month, and obviously there should be a stair step. So at every level up, there should be a higher percentage. But my rule of thumb would be everybody who's doing halfway decent should be setting aside off the top where you don't see it, maybe 25% of the gross. 20 to 25% of the gross should just come off the top, and it goes into a wealth fund where you don't look at it, see it, mess with it. But Peter, that's your specialty right there. Let's talk about how you put money aside that you don't touch, and what the rationale is, and how the growth patterns work, and all of that stuff.
Well, sure. So I think first and foremost, with any of these types of strategies, you have to have the fundamentals in place. And so, Stephen, what you just said, I completely agree with, but I'll take a step back.
Yeah.
What each business owner, what each client, what each investor, what each individual needs to do is they have to have the money set aside to withstand the short-term vagaries of any business, whether it's financial planning, whether it's martial arts, whether it's on a trucking company, any and all of those businesses need to have the financial wherewithal to withstand 90 to 180 days of fluctuation. I think once you've done that, and then you begin to say that my business is now one that is now also becoming profitable, right? The general rule of thumb, you said 25%, we tend to start with 20%, is that 20% should then be devoted to systematic savings. And that should be done based off of off of that net revenue that's above that profit line, right? So once we become profitable, we need to start putting that money away. The only way that really folks can be successful long-term in our estimation and what studies have found is to engage and develop systematic saving strategies. Lump sum saving strategies by definition are not habit forming and therefore typically do not work. It is not to suggest that there's not an outlier out there that once in a while that they can do that, but folks that will be successful long-term will agree to and adhere to sort of that 20% rule. Certainly anything above that number simply is going to add a degree of success to that goes above the 20% figure. But systematic savings is a necessity. The other part to this is really the psychology of savings, since this is now something voluntary, right? You're doing something that MasterCard, Visa, American Express are not. There's no contractual obligation with me to do this. So folks have to find the discipline and have to embrace the idea that if they want to achieve their long-term goals, they're going to have to really develop a contract with themselves to do this, because we can talk about it. We can certainly coach them to do this, but they have to do it. So there's the psychology of where do I want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? And do I want to ultimately diversify myself away from the need to run the martial arts studio every day, right? And so those are things that are critical to this overall discussion. But part of what we've done with the clients that I've begun to work with is we've engaged, and frankly, every one of them has done a great job in embracing this. And I think, quite frankly, to all of their credit, moving out of their comfort zone and beginning these strategies. And in one of the most recent cases, I won't mention names, right? We went ahead and put some dollars away, and we had a follow-up meeting, and 3 weeks later, though this is not a guarantee, right? We had depreciation of $3,000 to $4,000 in one of their initial accounts, and another one appreciation of another $4,000 to $5,000. And so the point is that once you begin to see this plan in action, right, you can really you'll see the benefits of it and understand the power and the value of the compounding of interest, right? So
yeah, and in a deeper level in this conversation, one of the mentors I worked with for many years passed away a couple of years ago. Sadly, but Nick Kokinas, he used to call it the contingent, and this is an aspect of it. He used to call one piece of this the contingent liability fund. And what his argument about the contingent liability fund is, we all know that we have revenue that comes in two ways. Well, multiple, but we have, initial tuition, monthly payments, but we also then have the occasional or hopefully fairly frequent big paid in full. Somebody pays in full for 4 years, 6 years, whatever it is. His argument was always every penny that comes in on a paid in full should go into the contingent liability fund, was his term. Basically what he meant was it should go into the investment account because frankly, you haven't earned the money yet. If they paid in full for 4 or 5 years, last thing you want to do is go spend all that money this month, right? So anytime that happens, that should be a separate amount of money different than what I'm talking about off the top, that then goes into either the short-term savings or the wealth account, and then is not touched, right? What I see too many times is, school owner might get into the idea of saving, and now they're at Wells Fargo, at Chase Manhattan, they move it in the savings account, which is making, I don't think it's earning negative interest yet, but it's
Close.
pretty damn close, right?
Close.
It's pretty close to you have to pay them for them to hold on to your money. In fact, it may be that they're probably charging interest on savings or charging fees and not paying interest on savings accounts.
Well, net of taxes, and even though inflation is very, very low, net of taxes and inflation, you really are losing money on a year-over-year basis to hold money in cash.
Yeah.
And unless you have a capacity to save 50 to 60% of your income, if not more, there's no way to accumulate enough money through leverage into retirement by doing that, right? You have to use and embrace the idea of the markets if you're going to reach your long-term objective.
Yeah. And there's a yet another dynamic. So we talked about dynamic number one is just getting the discipline. And nowadays in the electronic era, I just have everything set up automatically so I don't think about it every month, right? So Peter, all the accounts I have with you,
Correct.
you guys just take the money every month. I don't think about it because you're just taking the money every month. It's just going away without me, having to think about it. Because if we were having a tough month, I might go, oh, no, I don't know, about that this month. But the third element is, and I've had the conversation with several people about this just recently. Oftentimes I see owners who really don't have themselves on a reasonable salary, right? I've had several conversations, and these are school owners who have gone from 30,000 to 60,000, have gone from 40,000 to 80,000 a month, and they're working really hard. Their expenses keep incrementally going up. Their people keep getting paid more, but they're not getting paid enough, right? And there's nothing worse than working and working and working in frankly a job that you own and not having a reasonable income from it. So one of the things you got to get used to, the pay yourself first philosophy, which is off of the top, money is going into an account that you don't see, you don't mess with, that just stays there. Number two is you've got to set yourself up where you're making a big enough salary. And I'm not talking about you go buy a new Porsche and you buy a $3 million house and all that stuff. What I'm talking about is you put yourself on enough of a salary that you've got discretionary money that you can go on trips and you can buy the Porsche if you want or whatever it might be. And you've got money from that account as well that then automatically goes into, you're not going to touch it. And some of it goes into the short term, any case there's a problem. What's the, I was reviewing that PowerPoint yesterday, Peter, reminded me of the stat of something like 75% of the U.S. population, if they had an expense of $400, wouldn't be able to cover it. There's
fairly catastrophic. I mean,
Yeah.
Stephen, what you're talking about here is you've got to look, and I'm talking to folks that have by definition nature, right? You've got discipline. You clearly have a curriculum for your martial arts studios as to how to get from one level of a degree of a belt to another. So all of these things you're creating structure, and the curriculum is being used to teach and educate these students. You have to do the same type of work relative to your financial plan. And what you're talking about is, look, everybody's got to put in some pre-work to go, what's my budget? What do I need to live on? Okay, it's $5,000 a month. Great. Okay, right. So what does that mean relative to my revenue targets? Okay, and I've got $5,000 a month to live on. That means I need 15,000 to 30,000 in an emergency fund. Well, why? Because that's 3 to 6 months living expense. But those kinds of things need to be put into place to generate the confidence to then begin to save long term. And the thing that I've found with all of the clients that we've worked with through your client base is they're willing to put that work in. They're willing to go through the question and answer session. We build out a plan, and now we begin to save. And not a single one, I'm really proud to say this of all of them, and this is much more to their credit than mine, not a single one has come back to me and said, well, geez, I should or shouldn't do this. They're all moving forward with their planning. They're all saving now systematically because, to your point, they've built that in as a part of their program. But they had the courage to do the pre-work to really hold themselves out a little bit. What do I need to live on? What does my business generate? What do I need an emergency fund? Right. So all of that work was done to then establish that savings track. To that end, then you have to push yourself a little bit, right? What I talk to my clients about, what is meaningful and doable? Well, what do I mean by meaningful? Well, if you're making $500,000 a year to save $12,000 a year, it's not really meaningful because it's not going to achieve your long-term objectives, right? You're going to save a fraction of what you need for retirement, right? So it's not meaningful. So if you're making $100,000 a year, saving $25 a month, well, that's okay, but it's not going to be meaningful towards your long-term objectives. So you have to save proportionate to what your income is, right? And what your retirement needs are. And then doable is also, right? We don't want to overstretch, but we also have to commit to a reasonable number. And I think that's where sometimes I think clients, right, across any and all of my clients need to stretch themselves a little bit and say, look, I'm doing $500 a month, but I know deep in the back of my mind, I could do 1,000, I could do 1,500. And you want to stretch yourself a little bit, but you also don't want to overextend yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you have to challenge yourself a little bit.
The I think if you start with two specific ideas, one is a percentage is going to go off the top before you touch it.
Yes.
And the difference that all of us have versus somebody who's, say, working for AT&T or something, and you have a set salary, is we have the ability to create the revenue and create therefore the net profit based upon what our needs are. And
Correct.
Oftentimes lack of growth is purely because we haven't set up the money off the top. You haven't really clearly defined what the overhead is. And the reason there's constant expanding overhead is not because that's the nature of the business. It's because as you're more flush, you feel free to spend more freely. And that's a real failure mechanism. What you should be constantly, yeah,
Sure.
it really is, really is.
Yeah. So I think to your point, right, setting aside that savings and paying yourself first is critical. And it's a concept that people, clearly by the statistics that you're providing, the idea of paying yourself first has long been widely believed and held to be the appropriate methodology, but yet probably only about 20 to 25% of the population really adheres to it. But it's critical to do, right? Otherwise, you will, to your point, right, you will live up to that you will live up to your means. You will live up to that liquidity. And frankly, as a byproduct of that, you could also become static because you're not really looking at your goals and objectives, and you're assuming that you're wealthy because you have everything you want, but you're not really creating long-term wealth by saving it.
Yeah, and I can tell you as a business owner, you start thinking about salaries, rent, all of that stuff. If you're not careful, you start thinking about it differently, right? I want, for instance, full-time people to all be on a percentage, and I want to not let my part-time payroll inflate very much if I have any at all. And I want to keep my rent at 10 or 12% of the gross, maybe 15. I certainly want to be above that ratio. And so as you get more flush, there's a tendency to say, oh, I'm in this facility, the lease is up, I'm going to go over there and pay $13,000 a month in rent. Why? Because it's a beautiful place, or because it's got a lot of square footage. Why? I think that's always a mistake. What you want to do is you want to, keep those expenses in line, and then you want to be taking just more money off the top and make sure that your income grows, but that your lifestyle grows, but it's appropriate with creating wealth. Peter, one of the challenges I think sometimes in talking to martial artists and martial arts school owners, that's a lot different about, as you know, I work with people who do what I do with dentists and chiropractors and lawyers and one thing or another. And one of them is essentially a wealth manager, puts people in real estate with dentists. Mm-hmm. And I was joking with him. I say, is there any such thing as a dentist who wants to be a dentist? It seems like, the dentists want to be a dentist for about 3 years, and they're trying to figure out how to not be a dentist anymore. But the unusual thing is many people who run a martial arts school came from some other career that they didn't like, and they don't have a picture in their mind of, I'm going to retire when I'm 65. I'm going to retire when I'm 67. And so the idea of building a quote unquote retirement fund sometimes just doesn't resonate because their mindset is, well, I love what I do. Why would I ever retire? The other aspect of that, and this is similar, I talk to dentists and people who work with dentists and lawyers, and they say the same thing, is they think, well, they're going to sell the school and that'll be their nest egg. Well, I got to tell you, the idea of selling the school rarely happens, and rarely happens in such a way that you get a big cash payout. We can talk aside on that. If you own the building you're in, I mean, that becomes an asset. But it is an interesting mindset with our crew that they come into this not really thinking they're ever going to retire, or certainly not thinking, well, 65, 62 and I'm out, 65 and I'm out. They kind of think about this is the thing I love. Would all of you guys agree with that assessment? That's kind of the part of the mistake people make in planning, is they don't think that they would ever retire. Do you guys agree? So how do you address that with business owners?
Well, to the point, and I'll just reference the folks that I'm working with now, many of them actually like the idea of continuing to work inside the martial arts business. But what we are doing for them by adhering to this sort of diversification strategy and paying yourself first and saving strategy is first of all, we're de-risking the idea that you have to be able to work in the studio until you're 80, 85,
Yeah.
right? Two, what we're also allowing them to do is think in terms of, I'm going to save enough money to generate most of what I need through my own retirement sources. I'll stay active in the business on some modest level, and then begin to maybe transition the business to another family member, a child, or potentially another instructor. And I'll generate a small salary off of that to help defray cost in retirement. But the bulk of my retirement will come through my own means of savings, but I can still maintain my presence in the studio without absorbing all of the risk, and certainly not having to work 40, 50 hours a week. And so I think that is a great combination strategy that allows the martial arts owner to maintain some, presence in the business, while also not being subject to the idea that I've got to run this business at a high level myself when I'm 75 years old. And I think that's a very appealing hybrid sort of a strategy, right?
Yeah.
And certainly if you can then ultimately sell it when you're 70, 75 because you want to, or you're 65, then right, that's great. But I think it's the appropriate way, in my opinion, from what I know from the business, to look at it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. My comment about selling it was, so oftentimes what a martial arts school does is try to sell it to the head instructor, and the head instructor agrees to a price. Let's say it's 1 times revenue, divided out over 5 years or 10 years. And most of those deals I see, they get paid for about a year, right? And
the risk is significant, and the reality is that in most cases, sorry to interrupt.
No,
in most cases, the crux of the matter that everybody on this call needs to understand is that the value of the studio, in every case that I've seen so far, even if it was sold for fair value and it was sold as a lump sum, would still not be enough to generate the income needs of the owners for a 15, 20, 25-year period. So the value of these businesses will never be enough as a lump sum to do that. The beautiful thing about these businesses that I've seen is that once you reach a threshold of sort of that cost number, right, that expense number, to your point, Master Oliver, it doesn't tend to go up much beyond that, other than some additional staffing for training. There's an enormous amount of liquidity in these businesses. And if you take that liquidity and diversify away from the martial arts studio, the engine that is the martial arts studio can definitely fund your retirement, if not in its entirety, certainly to 70, 80%.
Yeah. And going back to, Nick O'Kane, he would say all the time, your martial arts school will create cash flow. It's not the only way it creates wealth is you pull that cash flow out and you put it somewhere else.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So, and that somewhere else should, in all likelihood, be mostly in the market or some combination of real estate and in the market.
Mm-hmm.
We are in the type of business that if you can own the building you're in, sometimes that's a good strategy. Other times it's a bad strategy. To me, if you can buy wholesale and be your own landlord, that's pretty useful. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the evaluation there needs to be like any other investment. So I think to what you're alluding to, Stephen, is that to simply buy a building for the sake of buying a building is not something that I would advise. If you buy a building that happens to be in an area where you're seeing significant growth and there's appreciation, and there's an opportunity for this building in and of its own to be worth more money down the road, then letting the martial arts studio pay the mortgage makes all the sense in the world. And certainly if at some time in the future that building can spin off revenue, whether it's from another owner who owns the martial arts studio or you're leasing it out to someone else, that's a great idea. But to simply buy the building for the martial arts studio to pay the rent, if there aren't these other factors in place, I think is something you want to be very, very careful of.
Oh yeah, yeah. You know, and what people get on that is they get the simplistic idea of the best thing to do is own the building that they're in. And
Not always, but
yeah, I mean, if there's so many factors. Among them is this the location that 20 years from now is going to be a great location? Are you buying wholesale or retail? Is the market
Right.
inflated or is it undervalued? What's the maintenance cost going to be of this? Is this something that's great for your purpose and bad for any other purpose, or is it something that has you know, flexible use across all kinds of different retail?
absolutely.
You know, plus the fact that retail's dying right now as is office space. So, you know, the argument for real estate on retail and office is probably upended pretty badly in the last 5 years.
Yep.
Is it?
Commercial real estate is certainly a sector that we are, even through our investments right now, have been fairly uncorrelated to. You know, we're looking at that possibly being, you know, at a relatively speaking low point. But yeah, commercial real estate, be very, very careful. It can be a great investment. But again, to your point, I think you have to factor in a lot of other things than simply just owning it
Yeah.
for the sake of owning it.
Yeah, with all of my locations, I mean, I went through the buy lease decision a bunch of times, and one time bought, turned out fine, but it was the right time, right place, right price, and in fact sold it later on, not wanting to hold it forever anyway. But usually I find the lease decision is a better one, just for all those factors. But certainly, yeah, my guess is you probably have a more educated guess than I do, but you know, my guess is either office or retail doesn't look pretty for the next 10 years.
Yeah, we have a, excuse me.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot that's going to flush out there. We certainly currently in the short term, 12, 24 months, have a negative or unfavorable view of the commercial real estate space.
Yeah.
And I would add that, you know, leasing, especially if you've got favorable lease terms, you know, it also allows the martial arts studio some level of flexibility to potentially relocate if something adverse does happen to the location, and there's a better location somewhere else, right? So if it's a business you own for 20 or 30 years, you may not want to be in the same spot for 20 or 30 years, right? So,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we've had lots of those conversations as well. Oftentimes, the perfect market right now isn't the development market 3 miles away.
sure.
So yeah, you're exactly right. You know, maybe to leave on this topic, and Peter, I know you had a kind of a hard break here in a minute. When you start thinking about the finances of the school, and we talk a lot about growing the top line and how to get more students in and renewals and so forth. But one of the things is you've got to be looking at your P&L every month and make sure that your expenses are in line. And I want to have, as an absentee owner, in other words, across multiple locations, the rent not be more than about 25%. I mean, not the rent, the payroll, to be about 25% of the gross. And in a owner operator school, you know, maybe it can be about a third of the gross, but that's got to include you. Okay. Now that's not you taking profits, but that's, you know, your salary as the manager of the school.
Mhm.
And that's the way you think about it. Rent, and what Peter, what I see with martial arts schools, they do all day long. They overpay for rent because they want the Taj Mahal. They tend to underpay good people. In other words, they don't have them on percentages, but they have too much headcount and therefore too much payroll with too many people running around, most of whom aren't contributing very much. And then the third thing I see is they underspend, and they're too conservative about how much they spend on marketing. And, you know, we're definitely in one of those businesses that no matter what you do, you're going to lose 1 to 7% a month. So we've got to be constantly putting new blood in. And the biggest mistake people made during COVID was not so much they lost a bunch of people, but they stopped marketing to bring new people in. But I see oftentimes not spending enough on that. And as a percentage, 12 to 15% of the gross is usually reasonable. The better way to look at it is always on return on investment. If I spend $1,000 to make a student who's going to be worth 6,000, that's good. And if I spent $500 to get a student who's going to be worth $400, obviously that's a losing strategy. I can't make that up in volume. So, and then 3 principles we talked about on saving here. One was a percentage off the top. And to me, a percentage off the top of the gross should be happening from day one, right?
Mhm.
Your number, Peter, is a percentage of the net, taking an additional 20% off the net. My perspective is you should be taking 5 or 10% off the top, from day one. And then it's that contingent liability idea where anytime somebody pays you more than for, say, this month and next month, that excess goes in to the investment fund, that either into the long-term, you're not going to touch it fund, or into the short-term immediate crisis fund until that's built up adequately. But so the contingent liability, a percent off the top, building your salary in so it's adequate, and constantly going through that P&L to make sure you don't inflate salaries, because that happens all the time, that you don't rent the Taj Mahal and then trying to pay for a ridiculous amount of rent, keeping it less than 15%, but preferably 10 to 12%. And then number 3, make sure you're spending enough. And we almost always counsel people to spend more, not less, on marketing. But put all those pieces together and you develop a real long-term investment strategy. Briefly, Peter, let's talk about why I say put it somewhere and don't look at it. Or maybe I should say it differently. Put it somewhere and let Peter look at it, but don't look at it yourself.
Well, I think, right, the vagaries of the market are such, right, and the psychology of humans is such, is that the underlying nature of the markets is to be volatile, right, over incremental periods of time. And as you compress that period of time down from years to months to weeks to days, right, the market can appear to be somewhat frenetic. And the psychology of that, I think, is very, very difficult for humans, because humans by definition are right. We still have that fight or flight mentality to us, based on our hundreds of thousands of years of development. So to me, an investment strategy that you put in place and then look at periodically with the trained professional, maybe that's once a quarter, twice a year, once a year, allows you to, 1, focus on your own business, and 2, not to ride the emotional roller coaster of what the markets do on an intraday basis or on a weekly basis, because that can be, quite frankly, for the average person, nerve-wracking. And I think the psychology of that is detrimental to building long-term savings habits. And so the idea of putting it in place, developing a strategy that you believe in with a trained professional, identifying and really understanding your own tolerance for risk, right, is critical. I think so often people don't do that type of pre-work. They buy an investment, they buy Bitcoin, they buy something, highly speculative or whatever they're doing, and then suddenly find out that the volatility of that particular investment was much more than they could withstand. So really assessing who you are as an investor, building out a plan, and then trusting a trained professional to manage that for you, and not looking at it every day and working at what you're good at, which is developing more martial arts clients, is the right way to go at it.
Around 5 minutes before.
Yeah, Peter, by the way, in the 18 or 19 years, how many times have you gotten a phone call from me bugging you about what the return is on a weekly, monthly basis?
Whopping 0 times.
Yeah, 0. Exactly.
The truth of the matter is that the successful investor, right? Again, all of this is stuff that's very anecdotal, but it's stuff that's borne out. Anybody that's on this call can go Google this stuff, right? Yeah. If you miss the 10 best days in the market, your return gets shaved by 5 or 6%. I mean, think about that, 5-6% over a period of time. It's massive, right? So the idea is you have to stay fully invested. The idea of market timing does not work. We can certainly take advantage of opportunities inside the market when there's volatility, but you need to stay fully invested. It's critical.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a commercial on right now, and frankly, they're pitching investing in art, which sounds like a really bad idea. But what the stat is that they have on that is that the average, only 1% of day traders ever make a profit. I don't know if 1% is right, but it's probably in the range of being right.
Any and all of that stuff is extremely difficult. Unfortunately, I think what people are being sold there is you can do it yourself. You've got the tools to do it yourself, and they're selling technology. But the reality is that the best and tried and truest way to make money is to buy quality investments, invest along your tolerance for risk, and stay fully invested. And to your point, which we've been discussing and harping on here today, is invest on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
Be systematic.
Yeah, that's where you're just, it's coming off the top every month. The putting in the market, it's dollar cost averaging, right?
Yep.
If the market goes down, you're now buying more, and if the market goes up, you're buying less. But long term, that works out extremely well.
Sure. Anybody can look at a graph of investments starting in 1920 to 2021, and that upward gradient is, while it's not consistent on a year-over-year basis, it's certainly consistent on any measurable 10-year period of time.
Yeah, and where people who don't understand economics go south is they and you hear this about retirement funds and Social Security, one thing or another, but they call it the slot machine, or the Vegas, stock market is the slot machine, or it's the Vegas, or one thing or another. Well, we know day by day, week by week, even year by year, it's very volatile. Over the long term, it's the most consistent place to put money that goes up and up and up. So it really isn't on a long-term basis risky. On a short-term basis, and again, it's more for us to go into today. But if you needed to put money aside because you're going to put a down payment on a house in 18 months, that's a different conversation than you're looking at a 10-year, 20-year horizon always.
Well, you need to define what some of the things you've been saying today, Stephen. It's another way of saying it is you need to identify the duration or the amount of time for that investment. And I can make it as simplistic as, for emergency fund money, which is effectively cash, that 3 month to 6 month money needs to sit in cash.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're not getting paid anything on it is fine, because it's serving a purpose. That contingent liability money that you reference, that's probably could be considered 1 to 3 year money or 1 to 4 year money. There's no reason that you can't go get 4 or 5% on that money, because it's got a mid-range sort of utility. Then your long-term money, you should be trying to get 8 to 10% on that money. But part of what we're talking about here is identifying what that money might be needed for, and what the timeline or the duration of that money is, and then invest it accordingly. But to your other point, investing is by no stretch actually gambling. If you adhere to a long-term vision to investing, it's actually one of the most predictable things that you can possibly do. Now, is your market return going to be 8% over 10 years or 10? I don't know. Could it be 7? Possibly. But is it going to go up? Almost assuredly. Where you get into trouble is when you try to speculate on a day by day, week by week, right, month by month basis.
Yeah, exactly.
But traditional investing is extremely predictable.
Well, on that note, Peter, I think we've gone 4 minutes over your hard break here. So thank you very much. Anybody who's already working with Peter, I'm sure that you've had a good experience. If you want to give some feedback, feel free. Peter, anybody who doesn't, what's the best way to get into your pipeline? Probably go through Melissa or Kai.
Go through Melissa. Talk to Bob. We can certainly send to you.
Well, why don't we leave it at that? They can call Bob, and Bob can get them onto your calendar.
Yeah, I think Bob is very adept at it and does a great job on it, and that'd probably be the best way to do it. And we're happy to answer questions, do a free consult, and go from there.
Yeah. So thank you very much, sir. Lovely
Great
to
to
have
see
you,
you.
and we look forward to seeing you in Keystone.
Absolutely.
Of course, I'm sure I'll be seeing you more often. If you guys didn't know, Peter owns 2 restaurants. So anytime we meet, I make him buy me lunch.
That's right.
At one of his
That's right.
restaurants.
You guys take care. Have a great day.
Okay, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Guys, any questions on anything we've covered so far today? Matt Smith, anything you'd add to that conversation? Or Master Moody?
I'd add, everybody really does. If you haven't met with Peter, even if you got a financial advisor currently, it's worth the time to take a little bit of time to meet with Peter and do a consult with him, so that you can kind of get refocused on what you're doing. And even if you're feeling like, well, hey, I don't have a lot of money to invest right now. Get a focus so that you know when the money starts coming in, when we're getting things moving with your school, that you have a plan for where it's going to go and what you're going to do with it. I think that's really critical, and you'd be surprised how much progress you can make, even if you don't have a lot to invest, how much progress you're going to make between now and the next 3, 4, 5 years. It's enormous. If you don't get on that, you've really lost a lot of ground.
Yeah.
A couple things that I would add, Master Oliver, and I think that the best point for everybody to remember is you worked hard for your money, from running the schools and doing all this stuff. Now let that money work for you. And the second thing that I think you said that was the most important was that you don't look at the stock market or your investments on a daily or weekly basis. It's when you get it over a period of time is when you see the change. So you don't make erratic decisions based on a short-term, a change in the market.
Yeah. The worst thing to do is to watch the stock ticker every day. And in fact, there's been lots of companies, some of the high tech companies in San Francisco and Seattle and so forth. One of the worst things, you'll hear the founders say one of the worst things they did is have the initial employees suddenly become rich, and now they've got the stock ticker on their desk, and they're watching the stock ticker every day. It's the worst possible thing to do. So let's shift to some other topics here. And well, as I do, something that you said, Master Moody, and just to keep in mind is the psychology of what revenue you get the school to be is, and again, I stole this. There was a company years ago, I think George Chung was working with them, if I remember correctly, Psycho Cybernetics. And they had this principle. They sold programs on goal setting and weight loss and, quitting cigarettes and so forth. But they had a concept that I thought was really good, is they called it a set point. And part of the performance, Master Moody will tell you, Master Smith will tell you, I'll tell you, part of the performance of the school is all dependent upon what you decide it's always going to be every month. And your psychology, and this is true of your staff as well, once they set a expectation of what kind of worst case scenario is for that school, it's amazing. It just doesn't go beneath that. And part of as an owner, making sure that you're making the money and getting compensated, getting into that $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, $750,000 a month personal income range, which is doable. I mean, $1 million school should be at least at 50% net, right? So it's completely doable. It's getting that set point, that expectation. And to me, if I changed, when I was using a billing company that took 10% off the top, well, that wasn't a big deal. I just expected it to be 10% off the top, and we planned everything accordingly. And if I was doing $25,000 a month and I took 10% off the top, it's just going to make me adjust, and it's just going to come off automatically. It's just going to make me adjust my thinking. It's why, as an owner, you want to put yourself on a salary, and you want to have an income that you expect that you're going to get every month, not the opposite way around, because then you'll make the school cover that, right? If you consider your salary just as important as paying the rent, then you'll cover that. You'll make sure that the school grosses enough to pay the rent. As an owner, what happens, the worst case scenario is you consider everybody else's payroll to be sacred, but then you don't worry that much about your own, and then you're not paying yourself. And I've seen that happen a lot, where people are running even a fairly high revenue operation. They don't build in that come hell or high water, they're going to get paid, right? So you want to just build in percent off the top. You want to build in contingency liability fund, and you want to build in a salary for yourself. And that salary can stair step. If you're doing $2 million a year, your salary should be higher than if you're doing $25,000 a month or $300,000 a year. But you can stair step it, but you should build in a salary. And that's just as important as paying the rent. You should build in a percent off the top, and you should build in that contingency liability fund idea. And with that, you'll start to develop some real, one, stability, because a bad month or two, you're not going to be panicked, and you're going to build in some long-term wealth. That then gives you financial independence, so you can just decide, how you want to develop your business as you get closer to retirement age, or as there's an opportunity to sell it or to expand it or whatever it might be.
And
So-
those things are important to have in your mind at the beginning, not at the end. When you're finally done and you're 65 years old and you want to retire and or you turned 60 for God's sake, and that's really old.
Yeah.
Okay, I hear
Come on,
that.
that was funny. That was funny.
Yeah,
that part
we
was
were laughing.
funny.
I wasn't laughing on that one.
That was funny. It was for him, sir, not for you. It was for him. It was for him,
Did you say something, Master Moody? I had
Yeah.
missed that one.
Come on, that was good.
One other thing that Master Moody was talking
I'll tell you, every year, what's old gets a lot higher. So I could just benchmark myself and Jeff Smith. So whatever age Jeff is right now, that's what old is. So I've got 12 years to go before I'm old. But when I get 12 years from now, he'll be 84, and that'll be what the benchmark is.
See?
And then 12 years from
years.
then, he'll be 96 in a walker. But then that's what old will be.
No, I'll still be riding my motorcycle, working out.
Yeah.
Just remember, you got 12 years to get in as good a shape as I am now.
That is true. That is a good point.
Thank you. And Sal's trying to catch up with me now.
Yeah, I guess so.
I'm doing my best.
One of
I'm
the
on the-
things
I'm on the
that
bike.
Master Moody said, and the good thing about our martial arts job, a profession is we don't ever have to retire, because to me, I've been retired my whole life. Martial arts was my hobby that I turned into a profession. So, usually you'll retire from your job because you don't enjoy it, and then you go do something you enjoy. The good thing about the martial arts is we already enjoy it. The only thing that might happen as we get older is that we have developed our school and staff well enough that we don't have to be in the school 24/7. We have the staff that will run it. All we have to do is keep our eye on it, and what gets checked gets done. So I don't mean take off for the islands and forget about the school for 2 weeks. No, even when Master Oliver was on vacation or, in Florida or at the islands or something, he's still calling the schools every day, checking on the numbers.
No.
But that's easy, much rather be doing that from an island rather than having to be at the school 24/7 when I get to that age that I want to cut back on the time that I spend at the school. Now, some people enjoy it so much, they never even cut back from the time they spend at the school. So in other words, you get to enjoy your life. That's what retirement is you get to do what you want to do, not what you have to do.
Well, I mean, I'm a firm believer in, people who retire die. I mean, all the stats show basically without some new thing to drive people, they have a fairly limited lifespan, but beyond that. And it's sad, now my father's, coming up on 90, and he actually retired when he was 55, but he was in a job that he hated, working for a life insurance company. But that's a different story. And maybe said differently, Master Smith, or not differently, but to emphasize, you don't want to be in a position, frankly, at any time where you're essential for the day-to-day operations of the business. You want to get to a point where, with or without your presence, I teach Jan a lot about taking every summer off, but that's exactly the way the business should operate, right? Paul, back in pre-COVID, we would tease Paul a lot because it seemed like he was in the Virgin Islands with 3 beautiful women pretty much every other week.
That was his family. That was not just.
I know that was the wife and daughters. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't make it sound like he's a womanizer.
I wasn't intentionally doing that, but the point was, what seemed like every other week he was in the Virgin Islands and having a great time and buying expensive watches. Last time he came back with a I should know it because I'm wearing Omega Seamaster Professional was his last acquisition in the Virgin Islands. Before that was a Submariner. But that's the way you should build the business. I mean, the business should be built that whether you're in there 6 days a week or you're not in there 6 days a week, you're fine. And then, but I talked to a gentleman, and I felt really bad for him. He was like 72 years old, in a wheelchair, had no staff. He's teaching in a wheelchair every night, trying to figure out how to grow his school. See, you don't want to end up in that situation. You want to end up in the situation where your business can function with or without your day-to-day presence. You want to have the ability to do what you want. And if what you want to do is be at the school, great. And if what you want to do is, be in Maui for a month, that's fine too. Contrary to Master Smith's, it isn't exactly fun to be in Maui and check in every day on the stats. Maybe a time or two a week, but not every day.
You were checking in every day.
Yeah. I was always checking in on Wednesday, Saturday. Wednesday, Saturday was always my routine. And
Can I ask you guys a question?
Go right ahead.
So I've had like a couple, 2 to 3 parents that really love their classes and stuff like that. One was a parent who had 2 daughters.
You've only had 2 or 3 that loved your classes?
No. These are people that decided not. Yes, that's correct. So about 3 or 4 of them decided for financial reasons. And so, I talked to them. They said they love the classes. And one was basically a mom who doesn't have a dad. And I wanted to know what you guys would do with that. And one was another dad, single dad, who could only afford $150, he says. I don't want to be chasing the low market and stuff like that, but I just wanted some inputs on that. So we have a few of those.
Can I answer that for him, Master Oliver?
Go ahead.
What you have to remember, Sal, is that not everybody can afford our program, but there's a few special students that you have that might fit in that category of qualifying for a partial scholarship if they've been a real asset to the school and the kid has a future, if you have future expectations for him to be a good black belt or assistant instructor or something like that, where he's looking at the martial arts in a serious, way. And if that's the case, you can do that. But when it comes down to it, if it's just they can't afford it, they can't afford it. Now we can try to help them find the way to afford it. Get another relative, a grandmother or aunt or uncle or somebody to help out.
Tried that.
But we're not talking, a big major house payment here. We're talking about, $50 to $75 a week.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I might add to that is number one, never negotiate price. Number two, when you negotiate price or when you bring somebody in who just barely kind of sort of can afford it, what happens when it comes time for the renewal? Right?
They don't go. So, they don't renew.
Yeah. There's then no way. And to me, what Master Smith said to emphasize, when you put somebody on a scholarship is, and I mean, we've had a number of them over the years, but it's got to be limited to maybe 5% of the student body. But it's got to be, we had a kid who had cerebral palsy, had a number of surgeries. The parents were missionaries. They were all, wonderful gift to the soul. We got the kid to black belt and we were letting them pay like $25 a month or something like that. I had another one. Mom was going to school wanting to be a paralegal. Dad was nowhere in the picture, and he was nowhere in the picture because he was abusive sexually and physically, and wasn't allowed to be in the picture. And I think he may have even been in jail. Well, that mom was on a scholarship and came in and cleaned the school a couple times a week. I had another one that was on a scholarship, and they would come in and stuff envelopes every time. So one is, there's a lot of people who come in that can't afford you. And giving them a scholarship doesn't mean you've got a wonderful student. More often than they're not, they become a problem case. Okay. Number two is there are people who truly are in a situation or a circumstance where it's one going to be very beneficial to the kid and the parents have a wonderful attitude or the adult has a wonderful attitude. And the more often you can structure it as a work study so that they're working off the differential in some way, the more likely they are to maintain a positive attitude and the more likely they are to be a good contribution to the school. And if you get too many that you think of it as reasonable that they really can't afford it, that means you're fishing in the wrong pond and we got to work on the marketing approach, right?
No, that's not the case.
Yeah. And I might add one additional element to it. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say they can't afford it when what they meant was they wanted to pay less.
Yeah.
And it's certainly, at the extreme example, you have the example of, in every trailer park, you have the satellite dish or whatever, and they're paying, $200 a month for cable and $300 a month for cigarettes and one thing or another. You certainly have those examples, but that's why I have, a prejudice on psychographics and demographics that I like. I like people who come in predisposed that they want to make their life better and they want to make their kids' life better. And there are segments of the population that may be struggling a little bit financially, but fit in that demographic category. To me, I like, first and second generation immigrants for that particular reason. In Colorado, it's always been, Hispanic, Mexico or South from there. But Asian immigrants, Indian, Pakistani, et cetera, all have a predisposition that they want their kids to have a better life than they are, and they're willing to invest in that. So if I have a prejudice, my prejudice is I like that as a target just because of the way they think about what we do.
And
Okay.
you brought up another point that I think is very important that I should have clarified. When I'm talking about giving a scholarship, and it is very few of those, there is a limited amount, but I never give a scholarship to give a scholarship. It's not a freebie. What it is they're actually going to do instructor leadership credits in exchange for that scholarship. Just like if a student was going to college and he qualified for a football scholarship, he would have to play football to qualify for that scholarship. And if he quit playing football, then he would no longer receive the scholarship. So,
Okay.
If you word your agreement.
Well, and clarify what you're saying, Master Smith, because you're not going to do that for a new enrollment. That's going to be for a renewal.
They have to be on black belt leadership.
Right. Well, but I'm just saying to clarify, he was asking about new enrollments.
Yes.
What you're talking about would be a renewal, and specifically, those type of scholarships I think would be more likely to happen.
Yep.
For renewals than for.
To be honest with you, I've never given a basic scholarship because I know that I'm never going to be, if they can't afford 150 or 200, if they're trying to get that kind of fee, when I raise, on the leadership, when it goes to 350 or 400 or whatever you're charging, they're never going to be able to do that. So I'm kind of painting myself in the corner. Remember our magic number, 300 students. Yeah. I don't need 500. 300, paying 300 is going to be your $1 million school.
Yeah.
Paying an average of $300.
Yeah. And to be fair, I've done a number of scholarships for people even when they enroll, but they fit kind of the profile I was talking about. And I never let staff do that without approval, because then instead of it being a truly needy person, it becomes negotiating tuition. So on that note, we have to call it a day. And Master Smith, I think you were you had an appointment with Willie right now, and